for text, maybe?
Because, just like Mr. Drew was talking about.
Alright, I'll put you on speakerphone and, just let me know if you can hear.
You know, technology changes, wires break down, you know, lights go out. I don't know if they said it's like, you know, I hate seeing anything.
Wanna see?
Dan, can you hear?
Yes, I can, Mark. Thank you.
Can you all sort of hear him?
Sort of.
Dwight, can you hear him? Okay.
Pardon me, you have a sign sheet.
No, but I'm marking everybody on the agenda who is present.
Gotcha. They do have it in the lady's office.
Wearing glasses.
Wearing masks.
These masks fog up your glasses. I've not found one yet that
No.
doesn't fog up.
Well, I was out in Lebanon yesterday running errands, so I put a mask on because, number one, I just didn't want anybody giving me crap about it because I was afraid I would not retain my composure if somebody started criticizing my behavior. But I walked in front of this lady at Harbor Freight, and, you know, I tried to be polite and I smiled at her and, you know, kind of apologized for walking in front of her, and I thought, she can't see me smile.
Right.
So then it occurred to me that I post this funny little thing on Facebook about being hit on because I had a mask on to cover my face, and suddenly I was popular with women, and then somebody, I will name no names, made a smart remark, so.
And everybody got it.
Here is an agenda on the corner.
They did.
Grab it. Should have got you before you sat down.
I have the same problem.
I'm just happy I made your day.
I've got 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and start the meeting. We do have a quorum present of our members. The minutes of your previous meeting, which were held in May, remember they were postponed from April, meeting held by Zoom in May. They were emailed to you with your meeting announcement packet. Are there any changes or corrections that need to be made to that set of minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll take one of you for a motion and one for a second. Robert, either one on your minutes. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Thank you. Next on your financial report, Robert had provided that. I think that went out by email too. But your ending balance, $153,221.5. After all the monies from the Anderson transaction have been deposited in the bank. And no outflow, no expenditures, so that's our current balance. Questions about that? At our last Zoom meeting, we did have that one in the evening hours. Since we were face to face today, I wanted to ask the members if there was a desire to change away from this 10 a.m. time slot and perhaps meet under different arrangements. And did we want to continue to meet quarterly, and which day of the month, and then which what time of day suited members best? I think we met at 6 maybe on that Zoom conference. What I was trying to do with that is catch some folks maybe at the end of their work day. Some of you that have to commute back in town, thinking of you, Heather, if you're in Lebanon, that may push you, but
I can make that work.
if there is a desire to change the time, get away from this 10 a.m. and moved to an evening slot, I'm certainly not opposed to it. It's for the benefit of the members and whatever works best. Just 10 o'clock will kind of disrupt your workday pretty successfully, and an evening might not be so disruptive. I'll open it for discussion. I'm just kind of tossing it out.
I think it might assist, I'm guessing it may assist for those who aren't appearing too, so, that the night option may be those who don't always show up for meetings, so.
Historically, we probably left it at 10 because that's the way it had always been, and our membership was all locals in town who were working professionals, basically, and it was not hard for them to slip away. But I certainly have no issues with looking at different time slots.
Robert, would that help you with your,
It really doesn't matter. I can get away if I need to, like it is right now. I did call Mark's attention, when I was looking back to look up something for him for the minutes, I did notice in January of 19, there were 3 people that asked to be removed, and one of them was Glenn Haynes. Have you talked with him?
I have not.
It was Glenn Haynes and Michael
Crenshaw and
Kenny Martin.
I know we removed and replaced them. I don't think we ever followed up with action on Glenn. His must have slipped through a crack somewhere. So Mayor, if there's evidence in the minutes that he asked to be removed, would you and Dwight work to identify a replacement for him going forward?
Yeah, if you got it in your minutes, then we'll go forward on it, but I tried contacting them and never heard anything. I was able to speak to Mr. Crenshaw and Mr. Martin directly, and they both said they'd like to be not be reappointed, so that's how that came about.
Well, and I don't think Glenn has not been in attendance for the last year and a half or 2 years that we've met, so.
I think he's of the opinion that he is no longer on.
I think so.
So if you guys would act on that, then we would appreciate a full membership too.
the other person that it may, back to the first subject, may benefit on a more off-schedule time to meet is Mr. Moreland. I know he's a busy, self-employed guy, and hard for him to know where he's gonna be in the day, and it might aid in his ability to attend. So Scott and I are pretty flexible, so I think I can speak for him. We would not be opposed to a 6 or 7 or 6:30 or whatever meeting in the evening, if that'd be better for the folks that are more strapped for time.
Usually a Wednesday's not good for me. Now during the pandemic, it really doesn't matter, but the first Thursday of the month.
Well, we had been, historically, we had landed on the third Tuesday quarterly. Typically, those had been April or January, April, July, October. And the reason we moved to quarterly is we did not have enough business coming before us to need to transact and meet more frequently than that.
Hopefully that'll change.
Can we circle back to that after we get through the rest of the agenda?
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I just wanted to throw it out there and let's take some steps to action it before we complete today.
I just think after the discussion, we may find ourselves busier than we have been in the past.
Item 5, I've just labeled it as clarification for use of IDB funds. And again, when we look back historically, we find that those funds had been used to acquire and or sell and pay any related expenses associated with industrial property. The IDB, the oldest date that I could find that dealt with the creation was in 1964. There was an IDB created and state chartered, and I have their approval by the Secretary of State along with the membership originally. Later, when metropolitan government was passed in 2000, there was a request to amend the charter and label the IDB as a combination Hartsville-Trousdale County Industrial Development Board. And it has been labeled as such going forward. So we are a not-for-profit corporation purposed to do industrial development. There is no language that I can find in our bylaws or in that's related to the TCA codes that govern these that specifically addresses how any monies can or should be spent. I think it is up to the IDB boards to determine what are normal and or regular expenses that are acceptable for each group. We would primarily, again, based on charter and bylaws, focus on things that stimulate the local economy, things that create jobs for the local economy. Those were the underlying purposes or missions that went with it. We had batted around in some recent months things to do with the monies on hand, and I've just listed a few right there. The list is not all inclusive, and that's why you've got blank lines down there if somebody's got another great idea. I had said to buy or sell industrial or commercial property, lease property to a business. In the TCA code, we are not, as an IDB, allowed to operate a business, commercial retail business. But we could list or lease property that we own for that purpose. If we had, for example, owned an industrial building, we couldn't set up a private corporation and operate it. But we could lease it to Joe Smith, for example, for him to operate out of. That's about the only restriction that I have found. We could grant funds to business entities for upgrades or improvements. We could hire consultants for professional services to facilitate the IDB's purpose. We could apply for, receive, and disperse outside grants. We could have members or others attend conferences and professional trainings that we would offer a reimbursement for. And that's just the beginning of a list that I had assimilated there. If you have objections to any of those things, let's voice them. At the end or somewhere in this meeting, I would probably like to have a motion that defines some of the possible expenditures that we might have. The IDB basically in the past has not had an accumulated fund balance. Just a few $1,000s was all. This is the first large sum that we've had. Thoughts on some of these suggestions, Brian?
I would very much like to see this board consider and discuss the possibilities of acquiring some potential commercial. We know our industrial property is extremely limited. Potential commercial properties that the mayor seems to be fairly proficient and aggressive at putting these tax lien sales together. And I think if we put down something in our protocol or our steps that we follow to stay in touch with the potential properties that come up, and if a property is coming up for sale that we could buy on the cheap, and maybe facilitate or convey that to a business later and help our community move forward, rather than potentially a private buyer that would just buy it, sit on it, and leave it dormant. I would very much like to see us at least discuss that with the potential of doing taking another facet at facilitating or propelling business forward in this county. Given that a good property for a good price comes together.
Other discussion points?
With that, so am I understanding that you are wanting to pursue real estate at a great market value for repurposing for industry and the economy within this?
Yes, given that
territory
we
have?
lay down some guidelines and we prepare in advance and we have an idea about what a fair market value for that particular piece of property that may come to pass in a lien sale. I think historically lien sales produce properties at under market value. And if we can buy something cheap that we could help repurpose for business later or convey or lease at a reduced value to help a business get started, because our mandate is not to make profit but to make business.
So question mark 5A, all 5 are recommendations or statements that you found within charter and previous minutes?
Yes, to sort of answer both
Both
of your
those, okay.
questions.
Because I think 5A really, that's
And
under
these
the
are,
5A.
at this juncture, they're my thoughts I'm throwing out. If you find points where we can concur and agree, I'd like to label those as guidelines and approve them and move forward. In terms of existing property, the IDB no longer has an interest or ownership in any industrial, commercial property. The last tract was the Anderson tract, and there is no more.
We no longer hold a deed to any real estate.
Correct.
I don't have a problem with any of these. I really don't.
They're just general thoughts.
I think it's a great direction for this board to work towards for the future for this community.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Under Tennessee Code annotated 753-302, that's where you're gonna find the powers
Right.
generally that the board has. Now, there is a provision in an earlier section of the code that says, the language is that you can exercise authority as long as you believe it is meeting the requirements or the mission of the IDB, and that the state statute is supposed to be construed liberally if it ever goes to court. But having looked through some of these, and I have talked to, and it's a later issue on the agenda, but I'll go ahead and kind of speak to it now. I did call other IDBs in regards to doing retail development, and most of them said the cities they work with had economic development people that brought projects to the IDB. The IDB did not go out and do those individually. It was usually done through pilots or whatnot. And some don't do retail at all. If we want to get into some of these new programs and doing grants and whatnot, I'm going to suggest that the board look at hiring legal counsel, whether that be the county attorney. No, there's a good shot he'll be a judge come September, so I would suggest looking at some kind of legal counsel, especially if it gets into the area of doing pilots or TIFs or something like that, because those are very, very complicated. And so just looking forward on some of these programs, that's what I would suggest, just to make sure that we're going to meet anything that the comptroller's office is going to do, and you'll probably have to do a budget and get audited and those kind of things going forward.
And you said that's 753-303?
753-302, and I will send this to you. I meant to print out copies earlier today, and some things came up, and I had to deal with that.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
could you
Some
repeat
of
that
the-
one more time?
It's 7-53-302.
The general discussion with, beginning with some definitions, I think starts with section 101, same part of the code, but it starts at 101 and goes farther,
It'll be,
and so the one he's referencing is 302.
it'll be everything under Title 7, Chapter 53 of the Tennessee Code is going to be for Industrial Development Board, that entire section.
And we are classified as a joint city-county industrial board, but we are a metropolitan, under a metropolitan government.
Okay.
We function for Hartsville, Trousdale County.
And that's per the 2000 charter amendment, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem with anything listed here. I think these are all good things. I think maybe we should consider adding, working directly with potential new business startups. I mean, I think within this room, if we've got a new business coming to town, one of us is going to have a little bit of industry experience, probably. And I think we should, like I've worked with Carson Jones and continue to work with him, I would like to see us do a little bit more of that. I mean, I intend to, whether we document it or not. I'm just suggesting that maybe we document that as one of our mission statement items.
Brian, did you have something else? Your hand was up at the same
I
time.
did. One, I completely agree with Mr. Graves on that, and he and I informally have tried to do that. Anytime we meet or hear of somebody with an incoming business or an interest in bringing a business in, we try to reach out to them and make them feel welcome and offer them any assistance that we can offer them in their, hopefully their successful venture. But on what I was, to clarify what I was saying before, I'm not recommending that we just run out and buy property and spend our money. But I think we should put the groundwork down to be prepared and stay in touch with these sales, these tax lien sales, and if one comes up, we are then prepared to go through the steps and do our due diligence and potentially consider acquiring maybe a piece of property here and there as funds permit. But I'm not suggesting we go out and buy a bunch of properties. I'm just saying I think we should be prepared and ready and take advantage when that sort of thing comes along if we can.
If we looked at buying industrial property or property already zoned industrial, based on the appraisal that was done for the Anderson purchase, then industrial property in this area would be priced somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000 an acre. So given if that is an accurate price, then our funds don't stretch very far to buy a very large tract. So a smaller commercial tract might certainly be more realistic than trying to buy, say, 10 acres of industrial property somewhere. Other thoughts?
I like the direction that this is going. I like the direction that there's some definition as to what this board's job truly is. So, that's my thought.
Dwight?
I'd say that in the beginning, when this was first formed, property was a lot more available than it is now. And the purpose was to take that undeveloped property and try to develop it into something that would produce jobs. With the high cost of properties and the scarcity of properties now, I think Brian, the way he's talking about trying to look at tax sales or be conscious of what properties do come on the market, certainly would be a good direction to take along those lines. To develop an industrial park now, number one, there's no need for it with all of the unoccupied space that's out at Tennessee Central. We have something that we're trying to fill up now, it would be more advantageous to try to aid in that, in trying to see that park fully utilized instead of even trying to do something else. A very successful model, in particular in smaller towns, have been where entities, local government or whoever, buys distressed properties, particularly commercial properties, rehabs them, puts them on the market, leases them to a new company for a lowered rate the first year or something, so that they can be successful in that. That's been done all across the country. Sometimes it's been an individual, sometimes it's been local government, but that model absolutely works. The problem with it is it takes money to be able to do that. There is a little bit of money in this. I don't want to see it dwindle away without something being done with it, and it tends to dwindle away. We start sending people to meetings and things of that nature, which is good. It needs to happen, but it can get by. The amount of money you have is not a lot of money to do industrial development. It might be a suitable amount to aid someone, to help with recruitment, but beyond that, I just don't see that there's enough funds to do much more.
I agree with a lot of what you say, sir. I think that what we are looking at is with the funds that are in the bank are not something that we can go out and truly develop make an entire development. I believe what I'm hearing being said today about sales that to pursue purchases is distressed property completely. You know, this community and town was, I've heard stories about the 70s just booming and how much there was so much out here. And I'm not dare saying we go back to where we were, but I'm saying we've had places that were occupied at a time that we might go back and look at those again and see if that's somewhere we want to not reconstruct but renovate or give back some life to. I wouldn't have moved here over 25 years ago if I didn't think that this place was just a magnificent place. So, and raised my family here. I believe that $153,000, we can make money within sales and hopefully keep our budget continuously flowing instead of walking away as soon as we have it. That would be my fear if we use too much of it. Just a little bit here, a little bit here and a little bit there. So I like the diversity within this conversation.
I guess one of the things that was kind of in the back of my mind in a perfect world, which doesn't exist, I realize that, but is we have some properties right here within steps of where we are right now that are practically become cost prohibitive to restore and refurbish. And they probably need to be condemned because they're going to be becoming a public problem before it's over with, a safety issue. And if we ever get to a place where we have, for instance, for example, hypothetically, we have a piece of property or a building or something that's real close in our downtown area, and the mayor has worked aggressively to try to get us into position to get those mechanical actions in place where he can have more authority to do this stuff. But if we had a piece of property that was condemned or was deemed cost prohibitive to restore, and we could purchase it at below market value because of its condition, and then maybe we slick the lot off, readjust the price and put it up for sale, because a lot of times the business just don't have the capital to slick a lot off, but if it appraises, they can borrow the money to buy the lot instead of upfront money. It's like when you're buying a house, sometimes they pay more for the house just so they can cover their closing costs. They don't have the cash to do the closing costs. So it's a similar thing. And I'm just thinking that we're kind of getting to a place where we might want to consider having a mechanism in place so that if something like that happens, we can speedily put something together without having to go through months of laying down the groundwork to be prepared to have an action to go forward if we wanted to. So I guess I just want to be prepared in the event we see the right thing come down the pike.
And in the past, if we look back at history, pretty much all we've done is sell off tracts of land and then occasionally send folks to conferences. That was it.
This community.
Maybe
needs-
that's all we needed, but that's all we did.
This community needs more than that from us right now.
Well, this could be a step
Yeah.
in a forward direction.
It's today that we need to make this decision,
It's fine.
or do we need to, you know,
I look at this as it's a decision that could be a work in progress. You could make a decision today. You could amend the decision the next time we met. You could amend the decision a year from now if you stumble across another idea that we did not capture today.
so then is this a bylaw change, a suggestion, or is this a charter change?
It would just be an internal direction for the board to take.
Okay.
As I see it, we would not have to change the bylaws because we're still, all of these still operate under the guidelines of the bylaws and under the guidelines expressed in the TCA code. So we are not deviating from the broad mission. These are just definitions that this board, and I keep thinking too, all of us are not going to sit on this board for 30 years. So whomever our replacements are will need some guidance on where we thought was the beginning point or the jumping off point.
So are we saying that we're going to incorporate these points into a mission statement
Yeah,
of sorts?
I would say so.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to that?
Yes.
effect? Okay. I make a motion that we incorporate and consider and further clarify the items listed under number 5 on today's agenda, including, which more to elaborate, letter A, and make sure that we have our protocol in place if we decide to purchase a piece of property in the future, with the intent to propel more business or convey more business.
And Robert, with, I'll take that as a motion.
Sure.
Can I get a second and then we'll, okay. Graves seconds. The earlier discussion on item A wanted to make sure that we added, including delinquent tax sales. And then as a item G would be to kind of specifically work with startup entrepreneurs, prospects. And that work with could cover a very broad category. It might be a clearinghouse to tell them you need to see this for zoning and codes, you need to do this to find some financing, you need to do this to make contact with an SBA partner. That work with covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, not necessarily give them money, but advise, counsel, help in ways we can.
So,
We do have a motion and a second with those clarification points. Any other discussions? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. It is approved. One of the things that has surfaced since the last time we met was a program called Retail Strategy Consultants. Scott and Brian and the mayor are quite familiar with how this works. This is hiring an outside consultant, and their focus is retail business as opposed to industrial business. And they have y'all been to 2 conferences that dealt with this?
Been the one that we're about to embark on our second one.
Okay,
that they
that's where
have.
I'm getting the second one then. And if you and Scott and the mayor want to elaborate a little bit on what this consultant group does and how it might stimulate or benefit our local area.
You can go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think to start off, and I'll try not to be as long-winded as normal, we have a group of people in this board who are energetic about actually trying to do something and help in the best way we can for our community. I don't think any of us has the spare time just to sit here for fun. So that being said, and this is yet another possibility I would like to submit for consideration to utilize these funds that we have, these limited funds, and get the most bang for our buck and make the largest impact on our community going forward. The mayor and Ms. Knudsen from Chamber of Commerce and I went to a conference last year, and most of you have heard this story, but for the benefit of the public, I'm going to go over it again. But we went to a conference put on by a consulting firm out of Birmingham called Retail Strategies. And we have another one coming up that further advances our training and our exposure to information. But they had designed a package that our members have seen, and it was very superficial package. They have a much more in-depth package, but this package of data was staggering in how it focused on 3 subjects that they deal with, and that's food, lodging, and entertainment, where we have nearly no entertainment and no lodging. So just in our food industry, we have a leakage report upwards of $140 million a year that this county is losing to outside counties in these funds. And if we were able to secure any businesses that could possibly grasp a portion of that, they would be successful. And I think all of us as local members, and we love this community, wouldn't mind a few more choices from time to time on different retail locations. So that being said, I would like for us to consider engaging Retail Strategies as a consultant and a liaison to help contact, identify, lure, and secure franchise businesses into our community to provide increased tax revenues, increased sales tax, increased jobs. Their contracts are basically 3 years. They're typically $45,000 a year, but we get a $10,000 a year discount because we have been attending their conference. So it's still a lot of money, but in retrospect, or in comparison, there's no way that we could hire a professional to do that job for that kind of price. A professional that is that skilled and experienced is going to cost well over 6 figures a year to hire somebody to come in here, plus expenses to go to these conferences and lure in some businesses. These folks have a very good track record. Ms. May has experience with somebody in Lebanon who has a track record within Lebanon. Many of our surrounding communities have engaged them, and I have not heard a single instance of unhappiness or unsuccess. We had a meeting with Ms. Beasley, who runs Retail Strategy. She came up and met with Mr. Graves, the mayor, and Mr. Jewell last year. And what I would like for the board to do is consider this possibility. I would like for you to think about this. Let's come up with ideas. Let's come up with suggestions and criticisms, so that if we do endeavor to hire this consultant, we do this wisely and we don't haphazardly waste or risk the public's money, but that we consider having this company come up and talk to us, and I would like to get Ms. Beasley to come back and give a presentation to this board, and so you can hear from her
When is
what
the
they propose.
follow-up conference that you were talking about?
Next month, it's in August, but it's,
Well, it was originally scheduled for the 13th and 14th. I attended an online webinar not too long ago. They're kind of changing it, so it's going to be all online, and so you'll have a certain date range once they release it to take those courses. Though they recommend that if you've already set aside the 13th and 14th, use those days to do that online course. And then in September, we're supposed to set up with our consultant kind of a one-on-one consultation sometime in September. So they're supposed to send out some more information on that, but as we get closer to that, that training would be posted through some kind of site that has all the information on there. And so we can, basically the 3 people that are on our retail academy group or training group can take it at our leisure whenever we want to, though. So they kind of changed it up this year due to COVID, so it's really changed as to what it normally is. But that's kind of where it stands right now. And there will be things as you go forward besides just a one-on-one consultation, and then there'll be, I don't want to say like a demonstration event, but I think they're going to pair you up with groups to kind of come up with suggestions of what to do with the training you've gotten as far as what to do in the community and to try to market the community.
I think the thing that I'm considering here that I'm hoping is that how can we make the greatest impact on our community for the better with what we have to work with. And you have to spend money to make money. That's a common dynamic in business, and I think we're going to need to spend some money. Now, what I would, if this board considers to go forward with this, what I propose is that we commit to paying for the first 2 years, which would be some $70,000. And then by that time, hopefully we would have some progress and some data in the positive form to present to the council and get the council to assist or fund this going forward. Now, the mayor has done some research on the legality of this. Apparently, we can't flow funds towards the city, but the city can flow funds back towards this board. So we can hire them as our own entity, and then we can co-sponsor this with the council at a later date. But I think our council is somewhat conservative, and it might be better if we have a track record to say, look, we've already done this, and we've got a business coming in, and we have some success in this, and now we're looking for some help going forward. Now, Mr. Graves has analyzed the contract. He did not see anything that worried him about it. It seems to be easily broken if our budgetary constraints change suddenly. We're not obligated to a back-breaking process. We can get out if we have to. So I personally have not seen a downside to the possibility of this, but I'm looking for some suggestions to make sure I'm not missing something.
Those of you that haven't heard a lot about it before today, thoughts? Heather, that might be you and
I
Robert.
know, I have a history with retail strategies
Okay.
within my occupation, so my day job. And what I have seen is a hard sell to the city council for Lebanon to put that within their budget. So it was hard for them to but they did, and they eventually came through and were able to. I'm not sure that's where we are, where we could lean on you all to do that. But, because a lot of times when you do bring in a consulting firm, it is an outsider. We are a small community. And I think that what we're looking at is an organization who is going to look at the demographics of what this community is, bring that data in from within what we are today, what we offer today, and it will tell us what's going to be the best direction for this community to recruit to go to 231. What's going to be the best direction for this community to go for 25? What's going to be the best direction for the community to go to 141? And that's one thing that I saw, and I believe the city of Lebanon is probably 3 years in with retail strategies currently right now. And part of my job is to sit through those city council meetings and hear their their,
Thank
yes, thank you. So, so, I think that this is, I think that in the early 2000s when we had Domino's, and Domino's is a franchise. And they do not go by the same formula for going and opening franchises that they did back then. We no longer have Domino's, but Retail Strategies gives you the data of who's the best person to recruit based upon your geographic and demographics within your community. So if you've got a population of, so whatever this census gives us, if we have 20,000 people, we're not ever going to be eligible for Whole Foods. We're not ever going to be eligible for Trader Joe's or I don't even know if Kroger's or Publix. But they will tell us that we do have the best butcher in town here in our local little grocery store that we have. And we are eligible to maintain the franchise of Food Line and Piggly Wiggly. That's what you get out of this retail strategy. So those of you who aren't familiar with it, they come back and they say, okay, Starbucks, that is a long shot. You're 100 below your population of what, they are not going to see that.
They also do an inventory of your available properties for commercial development.
Okay,
So they can marry what properties you have available with the demographics. And to me, that was a big, big plus because we've had entities come in the past, ready to come here, and we had nowhere to put them. So just the marriage of those two factors should make it a whole lot more successful. But if you just attracted one franchise of any size at all, you're gonna make back whatever the investment would be. Maybe in an indirect basis on payroll or property taxes or the thing is so hard, people want hard numbers that are hypothetical numbers, that are nothing more than your best guesstimate or past history in other places. But I think that this commission would probably see the wisdom in doing something like this. I don't know that I could have said that about past ones, and there will be a certain faction that will not see the wisdom in it, but you always have your no faction, I think. But I think it at least has a possibility of being funded. I would certainly be in favor of it and be a spokesman for it, for whatever that's worth. It might hurt it more than help it, I don't know. But
and I also mean supporting it by when you receive this information, and pardon me for staying on the farm on the other side of the river for so long. So, I don't know how the actual recruiting is for everyone. So when this is brought to the table and this information is given to the community, that the recruiters who are recruiting are going to utilize this information for the opportunities that this community needs. That's what I'm interested in, is to make sure that if you can't financially support it, then we'll at least get the votes, or we'll get the people who are going to plug, because they're going to hand you a black book of names and numbers of who to call within what franchises that would be interested in coming to this community, and how to support the small businesses too.
Well, let me go further. They do that. They not only just they don't drop that information on the table and it's up to us to go find them and call them. They're on a first name basis with these people, so they bring them in, they secure them, they help facilitate and secure and finalize that process as well. So they're working both sides of the track. They're not just going to run in here and drop us a bunch of information. Hey, it's up to you to figure out how to make that work. They go to 26 different business conferences around the U.S. every year. Once again, we could never afford to pay someone to have that kind of contact. They're on a first name basis with these folks. They work with them every day. Just for example, Ms. Beasley was telling us in that conference that there's half a dozen people that she could think of that were very small but very, very aggressively growing small franchises that we've never heard of, like a pizza place that loves small places like this, that wants to put a franchise in here. They're very cheap to get in with local investors, or they would provide a company-owned store. The mayor has been working aggressively over the last year or so at putting together an inventory for that, because that was part of part of the exercise that was required for the first retail strategies that we attended. So he has already done some of this legwork, and they bring it home. They, and like Mr. Jewell was saying, if we just landed, for instance, one Burger King, this whole 3-year contract would be paid back several fold of the constant benefit and long-term revenues that we would see in this community. But the other part of that is they look at this and they say, okay, Mr. Mayor has said that this inventory is available here. They say, well, I can tell you right there, Hardee's won't look at that because that's the PM side of the road. Your traffic flow is coming back into town in the afternoons, and Hardee's wants to be on the AM side. Now, that still won't work for Hardee's, because if it's on the AM, there's not enough room to stack 12 cars in a drive-through. They require a minimum of stacking. And it's not wide enough for a McDonald's because they require so many parking spaces and square footage. They know all this out of their head because they do it every day. We would never be able to figure that out. It would take years. I think this would accelerate the possibility for progress and economic growth in our community exponentially, faster than, and we're all fairly smart people, but we're not equipped to do what they can do.
Well, that's my point. If we're serious about having commercial growth, it's going to take something like this or someone like this. We don't have the time or the wherewithal to develop these contacts or to even put together this information.
I agree.
So I'm 100% for this. Whether it's how it's funded is the question now. And if it can be funded by this board, or we have to transfer this to economic development and let that committee do it, whatever. But it needs to happen if we're serious about it. Now, if we just want us to have our little empty, sleepy town with falling down buildings and we're all complacent and happy with that, then we don't need to do this. But if we do want growth and we want a vibrant community, I don't see how we cannot do this.
I spoke at Economic Development Commission meeting, Economic Development meeting, that we are also a member of, and that I got a very positive feedback from that. They are very limited on their funds. They only have about $16,000 in the bank to help with, but the hotel feasibility study that was done by the chamber some years ago would have to be updated, like an updated appraisal. And I got the distinct impression that economic development will be happy to pay for that update, so they are willing to contribute, as I understand. It hasn't been official, but that's the impression I got. Also, there is another study that can be augmented into that study. It's a retail feasibility study. And the lady that did the hotel feasibility study is a colleague of Retail Strategy. She actually spoke at that conference last year, and she's the person who came out here and did it, so she's familiar with us and works with them. Cobblestone Hotels, who was the one that was still sniffing around about selling us a franchise, spoke at that conference. They're on a working daily basis with Retail Strategies. And I spoke to Ms. Beasley about that, and I said we got really, really close in our investors, but we couldn't get it across the goal line. And while I feel like ventures in our town should be owned by our locals, where we can benefit the most from it, if we can't get it across the goal line, we may need some outside capital. And Ms. Beasley indicated to me in no uncertain terms that she had those avenues to provide to us with venture capitalists or people who are investors that would potentially look at coming in and augmenting our failure in our investment capital. So I think it is something to consider, just like the tax properties that we were talking about earlier. I just don't think any of us want to sit here. We want to try to help with what we have to work with. So I would like for everybody to consider that.
Given that I'm a former member of the commission, a very conservative thinking commission, I'm a little pleasantly surprised, Dwight, that you think that maybe if we did contribute for a couple of years and then that the commission might be open.
I don't think they would initially if I went in there and said we need 100.
No, I
but
certainly would.
If we can see that this has been done for 2 years and we've had this and this and this, I think with a track record that they would be. maybe not. And 3 years from now, you're gonna be dealing with an entirely different commission. I'm sure there's a lot of people there now that won't be back. Whose leadership is, who knows? You've been there, Bart's been there, I've been there, and I'm not making any promises. I'm just saying that based on some of the things that we've had come up, particularly in the last year, I've been pleasantly surprised that they are as progressive thinking, maybe, as they are as a body, as a whole. But they're also very fiscally conservative and hold the purse strings very tight. And but you're not talking about a tremendous amount of money. I mean, you're talking about what we would pay, less than what we would pay to buy new trucks from the sheriff to put the inmates to drive around. I mean, it's not a prohibitive dollar amount. But like I say, if we're serious about improving our community and the business climate of our community, which is the hue and cry that we hear from most of the negative people in the county, how are they gonna, they're the ones saying we need more business, and then we try to do it. Well, we gotta belly up and come up with the money to do it. So, you can turn an argument on somebody, I guess.
Well, it doesn't cost anything to listen. I think we should, at the very, very least, we should invite her down to make a proposal to us, so that we have, everybody in here has all the same information at the same time, so that we can take a vote and either move forward on it or not. We have a very unique problem in this town. I don't have to tell anyone in this room that, a third of the people support 95% of the financial activity that drives this city and county. Pretty soon, it's gonna be too expensive to live here if we don't get some business and other things to relieve the pressure off the property owners. So, that's my thought. It doesn't cost anything to listen.
I'd like to see them come in September, possibly if we could arrange for it. And I would carry it a step further, invite any of the commissioners that could come.
Right,
Make
invite
sure-
the members of the Economic Development
I think it's
Committee in
important to
particular.
keep that relationship.
Transparency, yes.
I think so too. I agree.
Plus, it's not a shock in a couple of years when you start hitting on them for money. They say, well, we've been kind of watching this. We've been hearing about it. We're familiar with it.
Right.
And it takes the scary nature out of, hey, we got to write a check.
Sometimes you have to make them think it was their idea.
If there's no objections to moving in this direction, I sense a concurrent attitude here. So I'll take the steps to get the contacts. We'll invite them at a future date that's suitable and acceptable, and we'll continue to move forward on this.
Awesome. That's exciting.
I don't think we're at a point or at a juncture where we need a vote on anything in particular. We're still in a fact-finding mode, so I'll make contact to get them on our agenda so that we can learn more.
I just want to move forward in a careful and measured pace. Yeah, where we can be responsible and not say, man, we didn't think about that. I just want to be measured about this. It's a big responsibility, but I just think we're going to have to take a risk at some point to help our community move forward.
Okay, let's keep moving. Next thing is I wanted to discuss the pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. This is something that Tennessee Central Economic Development Authority brought to the IDB several years ago, and before several of you were a part or members of it. And it was developed by one of their staff members who changed jobs a few years ago, and in that change, this thing kind of dropped in a crack. And we as a board had looked at this and listened to their guidance for several of our meetings, but I cannot find in old minutes that the IDB ever officially approved this or that it was ever presented to the commission at that time for their thoughts and considerations either. And Stephen, if my memory is correct, I think you were the sitting chair about the time this came up, and Jessica Farlow was the one that led the charge from Tennessee Central, and when she changed jobs, it just kind of fell off the table. Dan, if you are still with us and can hear us, you may want to interject some thoughts on behalf of Tennessee Central regarding this.
Yeah, it's just something I unearthed because we've been receiving interest from various industries, and when I replied to a request for information, it's pretty much a mandatory question that they ask that if there are any incentives the local community has developed, and so, after fielding these RFIs and responding to them, we had kind of like, not understanding where this is. I thought prudent at this juncture in time to, submit this back to the IDB for further consideration. It's kind of a roadmap that is put in place that can allow us to help market the available industrial property in the community. We can provide quick answers. It has a really fantastic eligibility matrix involved into it where a company implies that they are scored according to the number of jobs, CapEx, wages, and how many people in the local community they plan to hire. It seems pretty standard, and I believe it has kind of grown out of what the state implements in their incentives program. So, I think it's a great idea to have this installed in the community so that when we're responding to these requests for information, we can further say that the community is prepared for a manufacturer to land here.
I had forwarded a copy of the most recent edited draft to you a few days ago, and in it does utilize this matrix that Dan was talking about, and it's labeled Appendix A if you want to look back through yours and find that. It's in the first section, but labeled Appendix A, and this matrix looks at the numbers of jobs created. There is an application that a client would have to follow through on, but it captures a lot of pertinent information that might not surface in an initial visit to a community. So this looks at actual commitment that they intend to make toward their business venture at the community level. It looks at numbers of jobs that they're going to create. They get a certain number of points scored based on the number of jobs to be created. They look at the wages. Are the wages relative to per capita income? They get more points if they are above per capita income wages. It looks at total investment that they're presenting. They get more points for the larger the investment package is. And then it also looks at local job creation. How many locals do they intend to hire? And the more locals that they intend to utilize, the more points they get. This matrix captures a max score of 200. And so based on the score that industry receives from this process, it would identify how many years of tax abatement that they might qualify themselves for. It could be anywhere from 2 years abatement up to a max of 14 years abatement. Other cities and towns use this as a recruiting tool where taxes can be abated for a period of time while you're awaiting this business to get started up and in full steam. And like I said, we apparently, it was on our agendas pretty regularly, Stephen, back during your tenure, and I think it began when Philip Holder was chair, and then we just kind of let it disappear. So I wanted to bring it back to your attention. If this is something that you as a group wish to follow up, get more details, allow the folks from Tennessee Central to give a more thorough explanation, since they were the authors of this, we'll start that process for you. It's not something that I expect you to say, yes, I want this, and vote for it today. But it is something that you might say, yes, that's a pretty good idea, let's get more information and move forward. Dwight?
As a part of this, would it have anything, any component as far as fees, such as building permit fees or impact fees that would be reduced, or sliding scale, much like the taxes part of it?
To my recollection, it did not. Stephen, did you recollect anything?
I don't think so, because it's a pilot program, and how the pilot works is that the company would buy the property, transfer it to the IDB, and then since the IDB is a property owner, it is not taxable, and
It's
that's where they have the
tax
payment in lieu of tax, because they paid something instead of tax, they're paying something to the IDB. The IDB doesn't have the authority to waive impact fees or anything like that, because it's not under them. They're treated as a separate municipality. So the only thing it had any thing it could control was everything under the umbrage or the umbrella of the pilot, and the impact fees is not part of that. Now, as part of this program, if you want to work up something with the county talking about reduction or waiver of impact fees, if there's a certain amount of investment into the community or something like that, I could see that as a total package, but that specifically is not under the authority of the IDB.
To my recollection, a prospective client had to meet and comply with all existing fees, impact fees, and rules and regs that pertain to his business.
Well, I do know that in other municipalities, particularly municipalities more so than counties, impact fees are routinely waived or reduced for business industry that you find desirable, and they're more enforced for the ones that you have too much of or don't really want. So I didn't, this has come to my attention in the last few weeks. Is there any provisions for us to be able to waive impact fees or reduce them, and I didn't know whether it could be incorporated as a part of this package.
I think it could be, but I don't believe it was initially.
Okay.
Dan, do you have any update pertaining to that?
Dwight, is hard to hear. Can you repeat it, Mark?
The question pertained to building permit fees and or impact fees that the county might have on record. Was there any provision in the pilot that those could be kept, reduced, or eliminated for a particular prospect?
I did not see any mention of any of those fees in this draft
I think it's there.
of the pilot. I don't think those impact fees were implemented with the county when this draft was developed. So it
Probably
wasn't
not.
mentioned.
I think they could be incorporated, but I do not believe such language was put in this draft.
Just my thought that this is going to be an issue going forward, which Tennessee Central is who raised this issue, do we not need to incorporate it with this other if we're doing this? That's where I'm coming from.
I think that'll have to come from the county commission side, it can't come from the IDB, because the
Well, I know
county
you
commission's the one that.
Can't decide, but if it was something that needed to be
Well, that's what I'm
done.
saying, the IDB could work with the county to put together this package, work in Tennessee Central to put together this package that, using those numbers and the pilot that's been submitted to the IDB, saying, okay, if there's this number of jobs or this level of investment in the community or something like that, then there might be a waiver of the impact fees and that kind of thing, or.
You could reduce impact fees by a certain percentage based on trigger projections that they hit. You could reduce or cap an impact fee at a certain level, again, based on jobs or investment package that the client is bringing forward. There's no provision that exists either in county commission or IDB presently that covers that.
I just felt like if we're going to go this direction and try to approve this, could we work together to try to make it a more comprehensive package for them to be able to utilize?
Dan, this is Heather. I've got a question. This packet that you're trying to re-present, are you wanting to present this packet as a pilot program for the IDB board to approve this particular part of, and you go to other commissions or boards to get other options for the new investor?
The idea here is that it gets pre-approved so that we can use it as an incentive in trying to attract industry.
Are you happy? Are you happy where it's at?
Pre-approved, it has to go before the county commission. Is that
Are
what
you
you're asking?
Are you happy where it's at right now? Are you sure that the one that you presented 3 years ago is the one you want us to work with today?
I think it could probably be, it should be re-looked at to reflect 2020 and not 2016 when it was conceivably developed. I think there are other factors that have that other communities are implementing that could possibly update this.
Work session. Do we have work sessions?
Again.
This looks like a work session to
Brian, did you-
me.
Do I understand correctly, we're talking about adopting this procedure going forward, not a specific instance, but adopting this pilot possibility to apply to future prospects, is that correct?
We wrestled with this as an IDB for about a year, maybe a little longer back then, where drafts were proposed. We gained information, we massaged it for a while, but it appears we never reached the point as an IDB that we accepted and approved this this pilot program.
Right.
We got close, but I can't find any record in minutes that we approved it.
I think it's a
I
good
think
model.
this is just a
It's a
tool
model.
there
It's a
to-
good model.
The
Well,
second part of this would be a question for our mayor. Would what Mr. Jewell is asking, does that need to be incorporated in what we're doing going forward, or is this something that we would need to work in conjunction with the council on a case-by-case basis?
It's actually two different questions, because the impact fees is something different, so I'll address the pilot itself. The pilot itself is just a program, it's not industry specific or company specific. So you can create the structure of the program, saying here's the information we want, here's how our program works. Most of them post that on their website, any interested company can download it there. Work with Tennessee Central, who I think we have an interlocal agreement with them, they can work with Tennessee Central to get the information together. Then they would present it to the IDB for that pilot. Now the impact fees, that could be something while you're working through setting up your pilot, reviewing this to see if it is, work with the county commission, it has to be budget and finance.
Sure.
To say, okay, with the information, how you're structuring your pilot program, incorporate that into your impact fee, saying, okay, let's say they're gonna come here and they're gonna create 200 jobs. Well, if you create 200 jobs, we're either going to reduce your impact fee, or it'll be capped, or however that works out being. But once you have all that together, then you can have one specific program or information in place. The IDB wouldn't be in charge of doing anything with impact fees, but we could get the all information together into a packet that these companies can look at and say, okay, here's what I want to get with the Industrial Development Board, here's what their programs are, if we meet these guidelines, whatever, here's what the county's going to do on the tax side. I just think it could be all worked out together, but it's going to be two different entities working together.
So it'd be a case-by-case basis going forward. It's
Well,
not something that we can adopt as a board to take under our
I
power.
think you create those guidelines and then the companies have to meet those guidelines, and so it's
The
not,
matrix that's being used for the pilot may capture sufficient data that you could justify a reduction in impact fees on the other end.
well, the county could come in, that scoring matrix you got, they could come in and say, okay, the county could look at it and go, let's say they're gonna come in and build a 200,000 square foot building. Well, we're gonna either reduce the impact fee per square foot, or we're gonna cap it at a certain amount if there is that size building, or let's say they're gonna come in and spend $500 million capital investment on the site. Well, we'll cap it at this. I mean, there's a lot of different factors you can look at, but I think that's something that could be worked out, and just the county could already have it worked out that in that packet, as long as it meets these matrix requirements or these levels, then the impact fee is gonna be frozen. It's just one set of guidelines that's there, and so it's not really done on a case, I mean, it will be kind of done on a case-by-case basis, but it's dependent upon them providing all the information, so then it just becomes like the little Planko board when you go to the fair, they drop it in, and when it comes out the bottom, that's what it is.
Our impact fees right now are based on square footage. On industrial development, commercial development, it's 30 cents a square foot. The one that was proposed a few weeks back that I can't speak to was 250,000 square foot building, which would have been $75,000 in impact fees. And the only, the impact to the community would have been in a positive, not in a negative. It was what?
Say that again, Daniel.
It was 275,000 square feet, initial phase one, and then when all's complete, 500,000 square feet.
So it would have been significant to them, but it was not a negative impact to the community. It was a positive impact to the community. So when they're trying to recruit these industries, in a sense, we have put an obstacle in the place of recruitment that I'm trying to find a way to more evenly balance so that we can use that for benefit, you know, to tell them we have an impact fee of 30 cents a square foot, but because of the size of your project or the number of jobs of your project or your overall investment, we're going to lower that to 15 cents or 10 cents or 5 cents or totally eliminate it. So I think as far as a recruitment tool to be able to use it better, it needs to have some flexibility. If that needs to come from the commission, I'm sure it will have to come from the commission in the form of an amendment to that ordinance that set up the impact fee. And I know this is done routinely in other jurisdictions, I think. Am I right in that, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Nobody is implementing impact fees
So
to
it-
attract industry.
So I don't think this is a crazy idea on my part. I think this is normal, is what I'm,
Are you looking for the form of a motion to move forward or to adopt the pilot?
I would say
Move
bring it in and look at
forward,
it.
but I think we need to undergo a few edits and modernizations from 2016 to present and make sure we include all the necessary pertinent ideas. Because this thing was really written about 2016, roughly 4 years ago, and it has not changed or been edited since then. The last I can find it in minutes was about 2017.
Do you need a motion?
Not really. If you're in agreement again, we'll allow this to move forward and get the necessary updates and upgrades and bring it back to you at a later date. I just wanted to have enough discussion to bring everybody up to speed so that you realize what we were talking about and what it encompassed. Stephen?
I just ask, is Dan or Tennessee Central going to work on the impact fee question and some of these other things? Are they basically the ones that's going to be I guess, coordinating this or putting this together. I don't know, Dan, to hear
Well,
me.
what I would research and investigate on Tennessee Central's end is reflective of what other communities have at their disposal to attract industry. Are we up to date? Is the term limit, 7 years, 14 years? Is it 20 years? So I would just try and, reconfigure it to make sure that we're competitive, was also considering the county budget, because that really comes into play here as well. Before you pre-approve a term, you want to understand what the county budget is willing and able and not willing and able to sacrifice, for lack of a better term. Because that's a part of this, right? Payment in lieu of taxes. So that needs to be considered as well. And your coronavirus, how is that going to impact your budget? And how should we adjust this kind of term or schedule accordingly?
So you're gonna gather the information based on the neighboring communities and cities and municipalities. Are you gonna take this to the county commission once you've collected that data, or are you just gonna bring it back to us first?
IDB, I think it should come to you before the commission.
I
Thank
think
you.
the IDB would have to pass it and then request that ultimately they'll have to go through budget and finance. So anything that either freezes or lowers taxes has to be approved, budget and finance, then the county commission, because the IDB doesn't have that authority. So it would come from the IDB request to go to the county commission, and then they would send it to, they can send it to economic development, but it most certainly has to go to budget and finance, and then up to the county commission as a whole.
So, and please forgive me if I'm repeating stuff that's already been discussed, I'm having a hard time hearing, but what other communities are doing is they're designing these pilot programs with pre-approved terms, like on an Excel spreadsheet, for instance, so many jobs equals so much incentive, so much CapEx equals so much incentive. You guys have a really fantastic eligibility matrix with an application that allows you to discuss and then come back to a company with what you can do. But other counties are just coming up with a prescribed list that the EEO can say, oh, okay, you guys are providing 100 jobs, 100 million CapEx. You can anticipate this pilot if you come here. So the advantage that gives is just a quicker turnaround and a quicker understanding to their accounting departments, and where we fit competitively in the other communities they're considering.
Daniel, this is Brian. I would like to see that when you compile that information, because as well as when we go further with this, we may choose to be somewhat more competitive than some of our neighbors to maybe further induce somebody to choose us if all things are equal. So, if for instance, Smith County is doing X amount in a pilot, we may want to do Y amount to make it slightly more appealing. So I would be interested in seeing that demographic around us.
Yes, and I'll just say right now, Brian, that your example and some of the other examples of the communities who are north and south don't have anything right now. They don't have any pre-approved pilot programs. They're at the whim of a company coming in here with a team of lawyers saying, this is what we expect for this company to land in your community.
I see.
And they're taken aback by that, right? Because they haven't thought about it. They don't have a
think that's something else good to consider, because let's just say hypothetically, we did engage someone like Retail Strategies, and all of a sudden they became a rainmaker and we started having some businesses come into this town. We want to be prepared in advance and not be scrambling and be reactive to these people that want to come in. We want to be prepared and proactive.
And part of my pitch, for attracting industry here, is that we're a proven community. We have several manufacturers here. We've had some exceptionally large projects planned here. And this is just another component in selling that we are a proven community and that a company should come here.
I just wanted to sense from the board if you were willing to continue to pursue this and bring it up to date and modernize the draft and bring it back to you for your consideration at a later time. And I sense that you are, so we'll move forward, put that on kind of on the plate of things to do.
Dan, I'll check with, this is Heather, I'll check with GC over at the JCB, see if I can get any information from him sent to you, unless you've got a good relationship with him to be able to do that.
No, that's great. Please do. He's got so much experience in so many different communities, as well as the state. That's a really great contact and resource to communicate with Heather. So please, yes, talk to GC. I know that Wilson County, they're shying away from manufacturing and industry at this point in time. They're pivoting more towards white collar, as well as Sumner County. Same thing. They're moving more towards attracting technology and less on manufacturing. So I think for us to be addressing this at this point in time is good timing, because I feel like if Wilson County and Sumner County aren't going to compete for too many more manufacturing projects, Trousdale County is sitting ready location-wise to attract them to us.
I agree with you, but it might be beneficial for us to see if we could pull their previous marketing plans for pulling those industries in, even though that's not what they're marketing today. If you've got any old data.
And GC used to be in Rutherford County as well, so I think it would be very insightful.
What about the Tennessee ECDB? Do you have, I know there's a 501c3 that works a lot. I'm not sure if they're a lobbying group or just a statewide ECDB organization. Is there? And because I think
Tennessee Economic Community Development Department.
yes, would they?
So we work with them very regularly.
Okay.
And this draft that you're looking at is very similar to how they operate when somebody comes to them asking about incentives. They also have an eligibility matrix. They take in an application just like this does. They do their math, award points, and then come back with these incentives they can provide to a company to come to the state. Very similar.
They do not get the pilot program from the local community. They'll go to the state, so you need to make sure that it's compatible with theirs.
I'm sorry, you broke up.
If industry does not get the support from the local, they'll go to the state level. So we need to make sure that this pilot program is compatible with what the state's offering.
It all kind of happens at once, between all of the stakeholders for the project, TVA, ECD, Tennessee Central. We all kind of offer different incentives to bring them here. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yes, sir. Need to make sure the right hand knows what the left hand's doing. We're IDB and that's
Absolutely.
ECB.
So, TVA, they have a granting program. ECD has what they call fast track program, and that can be for what they term an economic development project, but it's primarily geared towards training, workforce training programs, workforce training dollars. Both TVA and ECD predicate their programs based off of employment figures and CapEx. So ECD
we'll move forward on this, keep it on your agenda for future meetings. Dan, this next discussion point, you'll probably need to lead. Charlie Lyons called me a few days ago and requested that the IDB consider making available some funds to assist with a groundwater study for a potential customer at PowerCom. Now, in the discussion, Charlie said that our county's earmarked Tennessee Central funds could be used in this grant money to provide for that study. So we wouldn't have to dip into our own cash reserves for this study. It would be through the Tennessee Central grant. So Dan, if you can provide a little more info on that.
Well, the project was entertained a couple of weeks ago here locally. They came out and visited the PowerCom industrial site. It is to be determined as to whether we will be following through on the request for those monies. But initially, it was conceptualized to look for groundwater around the PowerCom industrial park.
Do you remember what the estimated cost of the study was?
Yes, sir. It depends on, how much land we look to have the geologists explore. But in general ballpark, it's between $10,000 and $15,000.
As a board, if you are willing to participate and pursue this, then we would make an application to Tennessee Central for those dollars to be used for a particular groundwater study. And it would be like previous grants that we've made to Tennessee Central. They earmark certain dollars for each county in their jurisdiction. We very limitedly use the monies earmarked for our county, but we could use those earmarked funds to cover the cost of this study if you are willing to move forward with this. And for this, I would need a motion and a second to give us clarification in minutes. Robert makes the motion that we move forward.
I'll second.
Brian makes the second. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
All right.
Opposed say no. It is approved.
I will ask this post question. You said the $10,000 to $15,000 prospectively is earmarked. Do you know what that earmark account, the size of that earmark account? Are we well within that range?
Yes, it's 20.
Okay.
Next item on your agenda, I had listed the Carson Jones Irish Fuel request. If you remember from our Zoom meeting, just a short time before we had that meeting, we received an email that was forwarded to the members of Carson Jones requesting some monies for his startup venture at PowerCom. And in looking back at my copy of the email, it looked to me like he was asking for about $80,000 for different aspects of covering his startup venture. We took no action on it at that time, specifically because it hit us so soon. Nobody could have done any research and gathered very much detail on it. Scott had probably worked with him one-on-one more than anyone else. He is to be in a building that is a PowerCom Tennessee Central building. It's one of the old TVA buildings that was originally built probably in the 70s. he is being charged a nominal fee for rent of that building, and Charlie had told me that he could not clearly say what length of time that lease would encompass and what future use that spot might have in the master plan for PowerCom. That building may need to be taken down and expanded or moved in some capacity. But we took no action on it, so as a kind of a point of old business, I wanted to put this on your agenda. If it's something that you wish to pursue, we will. But if you'll remember, Carson had forwarded us a spreadsheet that had a lot of costs and expenditures. I have not spoken to him since that meeting. Have any of you, Scott, have you in particular?
I have not spoken with him in probably a month and a half. The last time that I talked to him, his business plan was continuously changing, and that's been one of the issues he's had so far. He's had a plan, he's amended the plan, he's re-amended the plan, he continues to amend the plan, trying to get the business off the ground. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I'm aware of his current direction. I will reach out to him again and ask him if he's got any updated information or plans on when he might launch. Initially, it was in January of this year, and obviously here it is July. So I know he's continuing to move forward, and he's got a great deal of personal money of his own and his family's invested in this venture, but I'm just not exactly sure where he's at. I think what we decided to do was to try to formalize the request process for such things, and Heather sent a first draft, which I reread this morning, and I thought was really good. And I thought that's where we left it, is we were going to try to adopt the policy to attempt to move forward.
We had no policy, no guidelines,
Right.
no direction to follow. I think some of the discussions that you've had with earlier agenda points more clearly identify what your purposes will be. Heather did send out just a few days after that Zoom conference an application that she was aware of. I forwarded it to everyone. It at least is a starting place, a jumping off place that you could utilize.
I agree. I think, I agree with what you said. I believe that we should probably keep Mr. Carson Jones on the agenda. I don't think that this board is going to offer $80,000 to him, but I would like to see us continue to build this mission statement, find out what direction we can be of use to this community as Mr. Carson Jones, said his first name, but instead his last name, but Mr. Jones builds his business plan. Let's find out where he's going with this, Scott, if you don't mind doing that. Find out where he's at, where he's going, and I think the tools that were sent out was a good tool for us to just kind of pick from to know where the person's plan is, because I'd like to see us assist the entire community, not just one entrepreneur or one individual who's wanting to start a startup company. I'd like to see this community be diversely offering individuals coming and investing their funds to this area instead of just one person. And I fear that if we jump and say we'll help Mr. Jones instantly with this project, I think we're too aggressive. I think we need to hold back and just continue to build our mission statement as he builds his business plan and bring us back to our next meeting and see where we both are.
Okay. I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory on where we were
I don't think we
from
need to
that
say
last.
no. I think we need to just say we're not ready ourselves also.
Well, I do think we need to move forward with approving the application, because I think that
we need to confirm the application at first. I think.
right. I think that I agree. That's where we're at. I liked it. I reread it this morning. I really didn't have any additional information that I was going to suggest we put on there. I thought it was well done. So perhaps if we can all review it again and get that approved, then I think we should get that in his hands, and then that would be a good way to find out what his current business plan today is, because I don't know. So, do we need a
Well, I
motion for
thought
that?
it was great what Heather put together. I have one suggestion to add, and that would be, finances, like, how is this project being financed by Iris? Like, where's the money coming from? And have them kind of detail what money they have coming in to finance the project, and if they don't have it, when is the closing date that they will have it? He had applied to Pathways Lending, with majority of financing, and he's scheduled to close at the end of this month. But we've kind of been through this before with Carson. He had qualified for an SBA loan and was gonna close, and he didn't. So just my 2 cents, I think it's important to understand what he has in hand before you approve providing any sort of grant monies.
Yeah, I agree. The last time I spoke with him, I made the offer to introduce him to a venture capitalist, and he was not interested in pursuing that because of his pursuit of pathway lendings. So I assume and you say he's closing this month, so let me touch base with him and see if I can get some information. I still think we need to approve or amend the application, because I think that's vital to have that. Whether we can do that in this meeting.
You
or not,
can, I
don't
think
know.
you can, and if there are things that you wish for it to be added, and in particular, questions about how is your project being financed, then those can simply be an add-on, to this application.
Kelly, I thought that was on there. I thought I remember seeing the financial section.
I thought it was too.
Well, there is a question that says, will financial assistance be sought from other agencies, i.e. state, city, county? And it's a yes or no answer to that.
It's a yes
I
or
think
no,
that-
not
Must be
Not
more
one.
specific.
not right.
Yeah, clarification whether he's got a personal equity stake or collateral, or, I think that would need to be more comprehensive to know what our risk is by giving funds or subordinate to.
Should I see if I can get him to come speak with us at our next meeting?
Sure.
I think after the application, where we were all more educated to ask more intelligent questions once he makes his presentation. I don't know enough about him yet to ask good questions.
No,
If you-
I'll add a definition, for a defined formula for the finances. on that.
Personal equity,
Can-
I'll-
bank loan,
I'll shoot that
SBA,
out.
all of that.
So, under, are we able to, if I shoot that out, everyone to make changes and then I'll, one more,
Okay,
is that okay?
Sure, that was my question. Can we approve it by email?
yes.
Okay, well, that's what I think we should do then. And I'll take the actions to reach out and schedule him for the 20th, and try to get an update.
That brings us back up to the item 4, which is meeting schedule. Do you want to continue to meet quarterly? I guess is first question. If so, then our next one would be October. That would be a regular meeting. We call special meetings at any time we have a need.
I think given that we've unusually have a lot on our plate right now in front of us, and this is an atypical meeting, I think we should schedule another meeting for next month on some of these topics that we're moving forward with, and maybe an evening meeting or whatever is most pliable for everybody involved, and maybe we can update and discuss Mr. Jones' retail strategies and a couple of these other things. I think quarterly might be a little bit long. Maybe we can move it up some, if the other folks feel like it's right.
gonna move to an evening meeting. Was that some of the consensus I read?
I'm certainly very flexible, but I'm sure there's other people that might
I
better
have
suit.
3 nights I'm not available, and that's the first and third Tuesday of each month and the first Thursday of every month, so.
We do a
And
6,
my first Thursday's out, so.
we would do a 6 o'clock Wednesday, that seemed to be. pretty
Wednesday
good.
said bad at the
Oh, I
hand.
Right now, it's okay. I don't know how long. When churches start back on.
Third Thursday? Right now, like in the third week?
I've got a commitment that would be on the third Thursday from typically 5 to 6.
Second
But-
Tuesday?
But I could meet at 7 on that third Thursday. Once my first commitment is finished, I could meet it at 7 for this.
Mr. Jewell, would that directly conflict with some of the county meetings?
Not that I'm aware of. I was gonna suggest that, much like the water board moved to 5 or 5:30, it might be less conflict with evening meetings, but easier for everyone if you did a 5 o'clock meeting or something of that nature, but that's just a
I could
suggestion.
break away
I can go at 5.
for a 5.
I just think that there's less conflict with other meetings if you go to that time slot, if everybody could make it. Typically, the day is over at the administration building, and most of our business is by 4:30 or 5. I know some people like to eat, but most of us don't need to.
So we're saying August the 20th at 5?
Just a thought.
I can't meet the, my meeting starts at, I've got a preset one that starts at 5 and runs to 6.
I'm
She
okay.
said something about Tuesday.
Tuesday, what about Tuesdays, Tuesday the
18th?
18th? The
I'm
third-
good, that's a
the
third
third
Tuesday.
I'm good.
I'm good.
5 o'clock?
5 p.m.
Is this room occupied at that time?
I'd have to check the calendar, I don't
We'll
know.
have
off the top
to
of my
check,
head.
I'm looking now.
but we could either meet at the mayor's office if we're back, if that is available, or we could meet here at the courthouse somewhere.
You can just let us know.
I'll let you know by communication the where, because we'll have, for public notification, we'll have to do it several days in advance anyway.
I don't see any other conflicting meetings on my schedule with the county.
So third Tuesday, 5 p.m., and that will start next month in August.
Sounds
It'll
good.
be August the 18th.
So we're just gonna, are we meeting monthly?
I think for the time being, at least until things thin out.
Till we clean a few things off the plate. And then if activity slows, we may shift back to quarterly. Those are all the things I had on the agenda. Are there other discussion points today? Thank you for being patient and staying with me here.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion to adjourn.
Coming up or not?
I think it's telling me. All right, well, they adjourn the meeting.
All right. Take care, everyone.
You too.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Dan.